Thank you so much, Dr. Firsing. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Now, we've seen Hillary Clinton in South Africa, and we know South Africa benefits from the AGOA treaty that we've got. But we also know that there is talks that after 2015, we might be excluded because we're too developed a country. Are you convinced that South Africa would be abandoned by the US in the AGOA agreement?
Right now, all sort of indications look that AGOA will be extended. There's an annual AGOA forum that takes place, and about 2 months ago it took place in Ghana. And Secretary Clinton was actually there, talked about expanding and extending AGOA past 2015. And it's been a worrisome issue for a lot of South African companies due to tariffs, and will there be another agreement reached that's similar to AGOA just for South Africa? But I think all indications right now seem that AGOA will most likely be extended. But again, it's up to the U.S. because they also need to protect their sort of imports and tariffs and regulations in that regard.
Yeah. Now, we know that U.S.-South African bilateral trade rose to about $22 billion in 2011. But South Africa's trade relations with China is, of course, also booming. How worried would you say is the U.S. about South Africa's increased trade relationship with China?
Yeah, I think that stat's been thrown around a lot this week, 22 billion, which is, again, a phenomenal number. But I think the important thing is, China is South Africa's largest trade partner, but you need to look at, break that figures down further and look at imports and exports. Now America is by far South Africa's largest export destination, which means South African jobs, creating, and most of that is machinery and automobiles and various others. From a Chinese point of view, they, South Africa mostly imports finished goods. That really doesn't help the South African, it couldn't help the South African consumer bringing prices down, but if you don't have a job to sort of pay for those goods, that doesn't really help that much. Now, how worried are they? I don't think worried is probably the correct word. I think the U.S. is just looking to take advantage of the boom in Africa. They probably are a little bit late, but historically they've had a good relationship. AGOA is an older law. It's been in place since 2000, and there has been strong ties between the U.S. and South Africa, and U.S. and Africa in general in various fields. Just to give you an example, Black & Veatch, which is one of the companies that the CEO is accompanying Secretary Clinton, they've been working with Eskom for the last years, working on the coal power plant outside of Witbank or Witbank, depending on how long you've been in South Africa. So that relationship has been there, has been positive. Over 550 U.S. companies already operating in South Africa. It's a big number.
But now, of course, Mrs. Clinton has not minced her words about China without mentioning the country directly. She has twice made quite acerbic comments alluding to China's, growing role on the African continent. Do you foresee a kind of scramble for Africa as the continent is emerging as, a growth area between superpowers like America and China? Yeah,
the scramble. I don't know. I think it's maybe the media is sort of digging this up. This scramble. I mean, Africa is. If you look at the sort of map and the size and the amount of resources it has. Mozambique, recently finding oil. Uganda, various other countries. I mean, DRC. I saw some figures that possibly underneath the soil of DRC, 40 trillion worth of resources, from water to diamonds to various others. So I think there's plenty to go around, and to see that this is sort of like this new Cold War, this zero-sum relationship. It's us and U.S. versus China. Right. I would disagree with that. I think a lot of the issues that the U.S. and China on Africa, for example, I think 95% they agree on. They want development, they want economic and political stability, they want peace, they want growth, they want infrastructure, and it's the same thing. It's good for all countries involved: U.S., China, Africa, etc. Yeah.
Let's talk about the issue of peace and stability. Obviously, the U.S. is concerned about the growing influence of Islamist groups, particularly in places like East Africa and Kenya. Do you think that South Africa is going to be pressured by the U.S. to take a more aggressive stance in relation to Islamist-linked violence on the continent?
That's going to be interesting now with the AU. I think the AU has been doing a great role, especially looking at Al-Shabaab in Somalia with funding from Japan. And it's funny how people sort of always forget about Japan, which is interesting. But funding from Japan and the EU is supporting the troops there with the Burundi and Ugandan troops. But I don't think they'll pressure South Africa to that extent, just because of the geographic distance between South Africa and some of the issues in northern, west, and in East Africa. Now, U.S. has a very good strategic partnership with Nigeria, and also has a binational commission with Nigeria, very similar to South Africa, and they've been working very closely with the Nigerian military and doing border operations. Again, so there's probably no real role there for South Africa in that. So, and Uganda, even Clinton, Secretary Clinton, when was in Uganda, talked about using American drones, piloted drones, to try to hunt Joseph Kony and various warlords. Again, no real need for South Africa there. But South Africa in the past has been assisting U.S. with intelligence gathering, terrorist groups setting up networks in South Africa using their banking infrastructure and that, and I'm assuming that will continue, but it's mostly a thing between the CIA and South African intelligence.
A final question to you. South Africa and the U.S. haven't always seen eye to eye on big global questions, and South Africa has, of course, served as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Syria is a big example. South Africa is simply not buying into the U.S. line on Syria. Do you think Mrs. Clinton is going to use this opportunity to try and get South Africa to change its position in relation to Syria?
Yeah, she probably will. I think the reports I've seen from today in the meeting at Durko was that Syria was discussed. Whether it will work, probably not. If you look at some of the past, the South Africa and the UN Security Council 2007, 2008, there was issues that put the U.S. and South Africa in hot water, one being Burma. And the issues with Libya last year is a very...
Libya was something that went horribly wrong from the South African perspective.
Yes, I think Africa in general and South African perception is they favor mediation over foreign intervention. I mean, colonialism to a lot of them is quite fresh in their minds, and a lot of them have this sort of anti-American view, and they don't want to see Western forces operating in various countries. And they're also looking to BRICS for their political heavyweights to assist. They want Security Council reforms. They want other multilateral reforms. Bretton Woods, World Bank think they have too much Western influence. So I think they're going to sort of stick more with the Russia and the China line, and that's why they abstained 2 weeks ago from the Security Council. So I think it's going to be, the U.S. is a difficult ask to see South Africa move more towards the Western view on a lot of those issues of regime change and that.
Well, a whole lot of very interesting points coming out. That was Dr. Scott Firsing, a senior lecturer in international affairs at Monash University.